So LHON is not a diagnosis anyone wants. But since LHON has come into all of our lives one way or another, we can either let it overwhelm us or we can do all we can to live our best lives, whatever impact it has on us. Personally, developing connections with others in the LHON community has allowed me to develop amazing relationships that have evolved in fascinating ways over the years. Mark DeMontis was the first Canadian I encountered. Somehow I learned about his first rollerblading adventure across Canada not long after Jeremy was first affected. I talked to him when he was in a van just before his next radio interview. There I was thinking that Jeremy's life was over, with only darkness and despair ahead. Hearing Mark's story showed me an alternative ending to the story I was imagining. One of a guy surrounded by his buddies, undertaking a great adventure for a higher purpose. Thanks to the internet, I was able to watch his adventures over time. I met Lisa Thompson, as she said, at the first of the 6 LHON conferences I've run in conjunction with UMDF. She raised my awareness of LHON Plus and continuously reminds me of the issues impacting that subsegment of our community, educates me about it, and helps everyone we encounter worldwide who needs information and support with non-ocular issues. Kevin Boland, his mom Estelle, her sisters attended one of our early conferences, and they've attended many of the others. And we had this conversation about how to get the Canadian, we need to do something like this in Canada. We had that conversation a few years ago, and look what happened as that conversation has evolved. Dr. Karanja, I had the great good fortune of getting to know him as he was with Dr. Sadoun, and then it was like, oh no, he's leaving LA. He's gonna get away from LHON and move on to other things. We can't let that happen. We have to get him staying with the LHON community. So thank you all for forming, if for no other reason than to keep that man involved with LHON. So, as you've probably gathered by now, I love connecting with people in the LHON community, and usually at an LHON conference, I'm so busy leading it that I don't have the opportunity to do what I love, which is hear other people's stories. This time is different. The folks leading LHON Canada are in charge, and I'm just a guest, so please, if you get a chance today, if you haven't already, please introduce yourself, tell me your story, and feel free to ask me anything. I'm an open book about my family and our LHON journey, and thanks again for letting me be a part of this very important event. Thank you. And I was asked, so as Kevin said, we're gonna excuse the two of them, and you said we're gonna keep going and do the next session and start lunch a little bit later. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm going to ask a couple of folks to join me up here. A few years ago, I attended a conference about drug development for rare diseases. And there I met our next speaker, Dr. Jodi Wolff. Jodi is the head of patient advocacy US at Santhera Pharmaceuticals. Over the years, I've shared a lot of what I know about LHON with Jodi. She's been trying to teach me about social work and patient advocacy. And as I mentioned in my presentation, one of the unexpected benefits of working in LHON is having the opportunity to develop friendships with people that I never would have otherwise met, and Jodi is one of those people. Please welcome my friend, Dr. Jodi Wolff.
Great. Thanks so much to LHON Canada and all of you for having us here. I think we have slides. There we go. As Lisa said, I'm the head of patient advocacy for Santhera Pharmaceuticals. You've already heard a lot about our product today, Adebenone. And I'm just going to go through briefly a little intro to Santhera, the work that we're doing. I'm going to tell you about a clinical trial in the US. And then Bennett will come up, tell you a little bit more about GenSight, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. So Santhera is a small Swiss-based company. We've been working in LHON since 2008. We are based in Pratten, Switzerland, just outside of Basel. We have a small team in Burlington, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. We have 3 completed studies in LHON, and we have 3 ongoing studies that I'm going to tell you about. Idebenone is on the market in Europe for LHON under a conditional provisional approval pathway for the past couple of years. However, it's still considered investigational here in Canada and in the US. It is not approved for use in Canada or the US. We are a company, we focus on 3 different areas. We focus on neuro-ophthalmological diseases, neuromuscular diseases, and pulmonary diseases. All of those rare disease with high unmet medical needs, so where there's not a lot of work being conducted right now. We have 3 different drug candidates that we look for. One is Idebenone we're studying. We're studying a drug called Amigapil, and we're also studying a drug in very early development for cystic fibrosis. So you already heard a great introduction to Idebenone by Dr. Sadoun, so I won't go through it too much. Basically works to increase the function of mitochondria and to decrease reactive oxygen species, which are toxic to the cells. And as you already heard, the optic nerve, the retinal ganglion cells have very high energy needs. So they're particularly affected when the mitochondria are dysfunctional through a mutation or through these reactive oxygen species. And so the healthy mitochondria are really what are fueling the vision. And what Idebenone does is 2-prong. We think it's an antioxidant to decrease the reactive oxygen species, as well as an electron shuttle to shuttle those electrons through the complex. Now we know, as you've already heard, LHON is a primary mitochondrial disease, and the retinal ganglion cells can be viable for years. But there is a window of opportunity for treatment that I'm going to talk about as well. Idebenone is given 3 times a day for a total of 900 milligrams. We make it in 150 milligram tablets. And it's a small molecule. It's in a benzoquinone. And so I do want to say, is there a pointer on here? Oh, good. So for LHON, this is the way we see it as a company. We see this pre-symptomatic phase where you have the primary mitochondrial mutation. So this is the carrier phase where you have the mutation, but you don't have any symptoms. And then you move on to an acute phase where you're experiencing symptoms. And then the chronic phase of living with LHON after you've lost the most of the eyesight that you're going to lose or that you'll notice. So there are many different factors. You have the etiological factors, the mitochondrial dysfunction, and then you experience the loss of the retinal ganglial cell function. And then the loss of the retinal ganglion cells. And so when you have the loss of vision at the beginning, we look at whether that can be spontaneous recovery or drug-induced recovery. So we want to intervene right here in the acute phase when you're starting to lose vision, before you've hit the chronic phase of long-term vision loss, to induce recovery of some of the functions of the nerve cells in the eye, which hopefully will lead to some recovery of vision. When we say recovery of vision, that doesn't mean recover all your vision. It means either increase the vision that you have or stabilize from future vision loss. So, as I mentioned, we are on the market in Europe, but it's still investigational here in Canada and the US. And what happens is that under this provisional pathway, the regulators tell us there's a lot more information that we need to be collecting in order to continue to be on the market. And so there are a lot of questions that are still to be answered by Idebenone, and some of those are things that we're actively trying to answer and tackle through additional studies. So we need more information about the safety and tolerability of the drug. In a trial, you're looking at maybe a couple hundred people, and you have information on that. But you do expect to see different safety in a much larger population. So what does that look like in the broader population? Can we prevent deterioration of eyesight? To what extent can patients recover their vision? How many patients are going to improve vision? As you heard the physician say, it doesn't work for everyone, and it takes a while before you see vision improvement. So does the treatment duration influence the results? Some of the mistakes that we see people make is that they'll quit treatment after a few months. But we know on Idebenone that you really have to be treated for at least a year in order to really start seeing anything. And then what are the factors that influence the results? Why do some people not respond to Idebenone and some people do? These are all questions that we're trying to answer that we don't know the answer to yet. And all of this is done through clinical data, through additional clinical trials. So when we got on the market in Europe, we got a very big homework assignment, which said that we have post-marketing studies that we need to conduct. And I'm going to tell you about one of those. Well, actually, we have three of them. One is a case reporting study where we just pull the medical records of people with LHON, not on treatment, and we will try and better characterize the natural history of the disease. So what normally is going to happen if you don't do anything? And that's really important for all of the companies to measure their drug against. So we're trying to better characterize the natural history. We have two studies that are all open label studies, which means there's no placebo, that you know going into it, you get drug. One is Leros, so it's an open label study in patients with over 5 years, with under 5 years of symptoms. And Peros is our product registry. So in Europe, if you're prescribed the drug, we collect information. Leros is the clinical trial that I'm going to tell you about now. And it's in the US. It's an open label trial. It's at 9 sites in the US and 22 in Europe. It's ages 12 and older with symptoms less than 5 years. You have to have a confirmed of one of the 3 mutations, but you can enter the trial before you've received your blood work back. So if you don't have the genetic mutation, you can still get started in the trial. All patients receive Idebenone 900 milligrams a day, pharmaceutical grade, made from Santhera. You have about 9 visits to your physician over 25 months, and we are enrolling a total of 250 participants in the study, so a fairly large study for a very rare disease. Half of those are going to be patients under 1 year of symptoms, so those newly diagnosed. But then half of those are patients who have just under between 1 and 5 years of symptoms. And it's important to better understand that group of patients to see, how long can we try and rescue vision? These are the objectives of the study. It's looking at Idebenone and whether it is able to recover vision or stabilize vision. And that is one group of patients under a year of symptoms and then between 1 and 5 years of symptoms. So I will be here for the next few hours. I'm happy to answer any questions about the study. We do provide, travel is covered. So if there's anyone interested in the study, just let me know over the lunch period. I'll give you my card and we can try and get you set. These are where the trial sites are. We have trial sites in throughout the U.S. And so, great.
Thank you. Dr. Barrett Katz serves as Chief Medical Officer of GenSight Biologics, a Paris-based biotech company devoted to the discovery and development of genetic therapies for ophthalmic indications. He is a neuro-ophthalmologist who previously served at the Montefiore Medical Center and Albert Einstein College of Medicine as professor of ophthalmology, neurology, and neurosurgery. He also was the executive director of the Office of Clinical Trials, which managed all clinical trials across all areas at both the hospital and medical school. Dr. Katz has been actively engaged in the private biotech arena and drug development industry for the past several years. He served as Chief Executive Officer of Danube Pharmaceuticals and Chief Medical Officer of both Fovea Pharmaceuticals in Paris, and previous to that at iTech Inc. in New York City. Dr. Katz obtained an MBA in Finance and Healthcare Management from the University of Rochester's Simon School of Business. Please welcome Dr. Barrett Katz.
Pleasure to be here today. Let me first say, in this crazy time we live in today, if you ever wonder, can one person make a difference? Think of Lissa. Really, an extraordinary contribution for all of us and all of our families and all of us interested in this. This isn't an orphan disease. This is an ultra-orphan disease. And you see how important it is for there to be patient advocacy groups and leaders in this arena to bring us together and share this information. I just want to give you a helicopter view of the company that I'm with now and what they're doing. And I do this because, for better or worse, gene therapy is the future of medicine, much less ophthalmology and Leber's disease. Remember that the connection of the eye to the brain is the optic nerve. That's the cable that gets the information to the vision centers in the brain. And it's the processing of that information that unfolds into vision. There's all kinds of diseases which affect the optic nerve, but the one we're interested in today in this room is a genetically based hereditary disease, which means that once the genetic defect is recognized, we can examine families and patients and subjects and recognize the specific genetic marker that they have. We talked about and heard about what this disease is. It's the sequential bilateral involvement of visual loss in both young men and young women. It progresses over weeks, and the second eye is ordinarily commonly involved, and the patient has bilateral involvement in the first year. It's named for a very famous German ophthalmologist, Theodor Karl Gustav von Leber. It causes central visual loss with relative preservation of side vision. The interesting thing about this disease is that it occurs, generally speaking, in 3 flavors, each with a specific genetic defect. And to put this in context, think of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which, by the way, isn't printed anymore. Think of buying 7 sets of this Encyclopedia Britannica, and think about having one typographical error in that entirety of those 7 sets, an A to a G. That's the genetic defect we're talking about when we talk about Leber hereditary optic neuropathy. That's why these patients, these people live perfectly normal lives before and after, other than visual loss. They can do anything any of the rest of us can do. Now, what is gene therapy? Ladies and gentlemen, this is science fiction come true. If you can identify the genetic defect, if you can identify the information that drives the formation of the protein that's needed, then you should be able to build the correct gene. If you can build the correct gene, then you have to get it to the target cells which the disease affects. So the science has unfolded for all of us so that we can recognize the defect. We've got it in 11778. We can build and have built the correct gene. We attach that gene to a harmless protein. We inject that into the eye of the affected patient, and we drive the formation of the correct protein through and into the mitochondrial matrix. This is science fiction come true. Now, we have to, of course, study the proposed drug and make sure that it's effective and safe. The company has, in fact, done a series of clinical trials. Some are fully enrolled, some are yet to be enrolled. And in fact, this proposed drug is quite safe and tolerable. What have we done as a company? We've done a very early, what we call a phase 1/2 trial for safety. We've done 2 large phase 3 trials called Rescue and Reverse. The only difference between those 2 trials is that in the Reverse trial, the subjects could have had vision loss between 6 and 12 months. For Rescue, between 0 and 6 months. Those trials are fully enrolled. We are currently enrolling another phase 3 trial in which there'll be bilateral treatment to both eyes. That's happening in North America and in Europe. We have a registry trial, and we have the long-term follow-up trial of our earlier trials. So this is what this company is doing to attempt to find a drug that works for this disease. It's a long process. It's not a straight line. There are ups and downs. There are wins and losses. But what I would remind you is, sooner or later, because we know the genetic defect, there should be an interventional therapy for these patients, for you and your families, that will make sense. Of course, remember that, as in all therapies, the earliest a patient is treated, the better clinical result they will do. If you've been blind for 35 years, you're much less likely to be benefited by one of these new therapies. Perhaps what is the ideal time for intervention? Of course, it's going to be before you lose vision. But remember that there will be a spectrum of responses, and different people will respond to different interventions. So take heart. The science is catching up with us, and the news for the future is good. Thank you for your time.